Today is both Passover and Shabbat. There are a lot of different greetings we can do. Right? Traditionally, there are many people, at least Ashkenazi custom, is to say Chag, Pesach, Kasher, v'Sameach. Have a happy and a kosher Passover. In Yiddish, I might mess up the accent, the pronunciation, but Kushrin ufreilichen Pesach. Did I do okay? All right. I've got to be honest, it's one of my pet peeves, and I acknowledge I have a lot of them. It can be temperamental at times. But I'm really not a big fan of that greeting. And there are a few different reasons. But I make a point when I wish people a Chag Sameach or a Happy Pesach, is not a Chag Pesach Kasher v'Sameach, a happy and kosher Pesach. Simply a happy one. Now, there's different reasons for it, right? Part of it is it's a tongue twister, right? When you're going around the room and you're saying it every 6 inches, right? Which is nice that we have people back and there's a big crowd and it's like that again. It takes a while to get it out, the whole sentence. But there's more than that. I'm a big believer that a person should only say things that they honestly believe in, not what they think others want to hear. And I think today we've fallen out of that habit, right? Politicians certainly haven't been good role models for saying what you really believe or what you really mean. And frankly, I don't know that clergy are always so much better. But for me, the idea of wishing someone a Chag v'Kasher, a Pesach Kasher v'Sameach, right? I don't get it. What kind of a greeting, when you think about it, really focuses on halakha? Today wasn't Pesach, it was just an ordinary Shabbat. Who would ever wish somebody a Shabbat Shomer v'Shalom? May you have a peaceful and observant Sabbath. It feels presumptuous. What do you think about what it is? And to say Chag v'Kasher Sameach, it feels presumptuous for me. I would love for everybody to observe the mitzvot of Pesach, but I know there are people who can't. I know there are other people who will choose not to, and it feels weird to me and presumptuous to say to them, have a happy and kosher Pesach. It doesn't sound as good in English, does it, as it does in the Hebrew? But again, I'm a big believer that if you wouldn't say something in a language you understand, then maybe you should rethink saying it. I mean, off topic, I digress, but if anyone's ever noticed the sections in the Siddur we use where they don't translate it to English. Instead, they just have an adaptive reading or a meditation or something in its place rather than an actual translation. If you don't speak Hebrew, you might wonder what it is you're saying or singing and why they don't feel comfortable translating it. It's the topic for a different sermon. The issue today for me is the emphasis it puts on the kosher Pesach. Because again, I want to be very clear, the kashrut, the halakhic aspects of Pesach are important. It's not the only part of Pesach that matters. And in the world today, in the Jewish world, we've, I think, overemphasized the kashrut aspects of Pesach. We place the emphasis on that side of the holiday, and I think it's to the detriment of the meaning, the message of what Passover is. Passover has several names. Chag HaPesach, right? It's the holiday about the rituals of the Pesach, the Paschal sacrifice. It's Chag HaMatzot, it's a festival, a holiday about chumetz and leaven and not eating it and eating the matzah instead. But it's also Chag HaCherut. It's a festival of freedom, a celebration of what it means to be free, to be able to leave oppression, leaving behind the chains of bondage and a journey our ancestors took to becoming an independent nation. Now there's a dichotomy in Jewish tradition, a split between two different concepts, halakha and agadah. The law and, for lack of a better word, because it's not a great translation of agadah, the story. Rabbinic literature such as the Talmud and Midrash are often described in these terms. There's a halachic section of the Talmud, and there's agadic sections, the laws and the stories. But it's not just rabbinic literature. If you read through the Torah seems split in this aspect. You can characterize sections of it as halakha, law, and sections of it as agadah, as narrative. The book of Bereshit is almost entirely agadah. It's the stories of creation, the flood, the patriarchs, the matriarchs, Joseph and our ancestors' journey into Egypt. The book of Shemot begins again with more Agadah, more story. And then we start to get into Halakha. Once we're a nation, once we're a free people, once we're standing at Mount Sinai, that's where God starts to give us the mitzvot, the commandments. And the rest of the Torah from that moment on is intertwined. There are sections that have a lot of halakha, a lot of law, and sections that are a lot of narrative, the Agadah. And the two are often viewed as separate, and sometimes even worse than the two are just separate entirely. Sometimes the halakha is viewed as somehow more supreme, more important, more authoritative, essential, perhaps, to some. And I think today rabbis spend far too much time focused on the halakha. In seminaries, in yeshivot, and Jews around the world, I think, spend far too much time focused on the halakha. Not that it's not important, but Pesach's a perfect example. There are deoraita, biblical commanded mitzvot, that we have to observe on Passover. And then there are derabanan mitzvot, rabbinic commandments. These are how the Torah's laws were interpreted in each and every generation. And then there are more and more laws, more restrictions that each generation of rabbis have put on. In the Shulchan Aruch, there's an entire there's chapters dedicated to the question of chumetz. What makes something become chumetz? What is chumetz? What isn't chumetz? What is something that's not chumetz, but we shouldn't eat it because it might be chumetz? There is a chapter in the Shulchan Aruch dedicated to what happens if spit or other, I won't go into the details, other bodily fluids get on some wheat or some grain. Do they turn it into chumetz? It's not a question of if water gets on it accidentally. That's a situation I could see happening. Or could you make bread with fruit juice, make some kind of a sweet cake? It's a discussion in the Talmud instead of water, and get around the loophole and have leaven. This is a question of if bodily fluids, if spit gets on your flour, does that become chumetz? And it's not just a discussion in the Shulchan Aruch. The century of rabbis afterwards debated and discussed this in great depth. If you open the Mishnah Berurah, you can find opinions that explain which fluids do and which fluids don't. Again, I won't get into the details for you. And then a disagreement about whether or not it's only human, or if it's an animal spit or something, does that also do it? That's become for many what Pesach is about. The law, the halakha. It's been focused on and focused on and focused on till we're going to such minutia, such details, that we've lost ourselves the concept of what the holiday is really about. It's a holiday of halakha, but it should be the holiday of Agadah. I mean, after all, the book that we use for our Seder is called the Haggadah. It's the same root. It is the story of what the Seder is really about. It's not a book about the rituals. It's a book about the stories, the intentions behind those rituals. But somehow, cleaning obsessively, beyond what's biblically or even rabbinically required, has become to many what is normative Judaism. Rather than focusing on the lessons, the values behind the laws and the rituals that they're meant to teach us. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, many of you are probably familiar with him. If you attended my class on the founders of conservative Judaism, we did a session on him, you might remember that. And many of you are probably familiar with his work, The Sabbath, which is very popular, along with much of his other activities. But Rabbi Heschel understood that one of the problems facing Judaism in his day was that there was an emphasis put on halakha to the diminishment of Agadah. I'm going to abbreviate, but in one of his books he writes the following. Halakha represents the strength to shape one's life according to a fixed pattern. It is a form-giving force. Agadah is the expression of man's ceaseless striving that often defies all limitations. Agadah deals with man's ineffable relations to God and to other man and to the world. Halakha deals with details, with each commandment separately, and Agadah with the whole of life, the totality of religious life. Halakha deals with the law, Agadah with the meaning of the law. He goes on. Halakha gives us knowledge. Agadah gives us aspiration. Halakha gives us the norms for action, and Agadah the vision of the ends of living. Halakha prescribes, Agadah suggests. Halakha decrees, and Agadah inspires. Halakha is definite, Agadah is elusive. Halakha by necessity treats with the law in the abstract, regardless of the totality of the person in front of them. Agadah keeps on reminding that the purpose of performance is to transform the performer. The purpose of observance is to train us in achieving spiritual ends. It's a powerful passage, I think, and it captures the dichotomy and importance of both, but the role that Agadah should play. And Pesach is the perfect example of that holiday. The Haggadah is the example of how Halakha and Agadah live together in unison. How each ritual has a meaning and purpose, a lesson and a message to teach us. Each ritual is done not to check a box, but to impact us. And the rituals of the Seder, if done correctly, can really be transformative. To know what it means to be free, to remember what it means to be oppressed. But instead we focus so much on the minute details of the holiday. There was a video floating around the internet a few years ago. Rabbi Grover actually sent it to me. It's a funny video. I don't know if anyone else has seen it. I imagine some of you may have. It was at a Pesach retreat. A woman was accidentally served kitniot, and she was unhappy. In the video, she starts by yelling and screaming. She moves on to demeaning the staff. And at the end of it, she starts actually throwing the food in the plates. She was very concerned about the halakha, but she wasn't concerned about the Agadah, the meaning of the holiday, of respecting the people that were working to make her holiday possible, remembering what it means to be oppressed. She wasn't standing up for the oppressed, she became in that moment a pharaoh, an oppressor. It's a holiday about freedom, not avoiding chametz. Hag HaCherut. And the truth is, it's not just in this crazy video. I see it when I go to Sobeys to prepare for Pesach. I've seen it when I've gone to communal seders and how people treat the waitstaff, the servers. I've seen it all over the place. And I imagine if you're honest with yourselves, you've seen it too. It's not just the Seder. Each and every Jewish ritual, each and every one of them become meaningless when the details of halakha are focused to the exclusion of Agadah. A person can spend a week koshering and searching for crumbs in their home without seeking to remove the chumetz within themselves. A person can recite the words of the Siddur to the letter and still not actually pray. And a person can observe Shabbat without in a moment experiencing what it's about. And when the mitzvot are performed that way, as rote, the commandments become idolatry. They become a goal unto themselves rather than a means to an end. You can observe each and every commandment without really hearing the one who commands them. There's danger when it comes to the Agadah too. One can live Jewish values without actually living Jewishly. And the values themselves can be raised up beyond the source of the value, the one who gives meaning to them. Agadah can also become idolatry. We need both. As Heschel wrote, to maintain that the essence of Judaism consists exclusively of halakha is as erroneous as to maintain that the essence of Judaism consists exclusively of Agadah. The interrelationship of halakha and Agadah is the very heart of Judaism. Halakha without Agadah is dead. Agadah without halakha is wild. This is what it means to be a conservative Jew. to live in that middle space. It's a narrow space. It's a difficult place to occupy, but it's one that's incredibly important, one that maintains that balance between halakha and agadah, the law and the purpose, the meaning of it. Think about the Seder. There are those who abbreviate it, who skip rituals entirely and jump to the meal. They miss out on what the holiday is about. They focus on the present to the exclusion of the past. But there are those who make sure to perform every ritual perfectly, down to the minutest halachic detail. And they check every box. They observe the letter of the law, but not the spirit of it to live inside them. They're connected to the past, but their Judaism doesn't connect to the present. And that's my fear, that in either extreme, living only in the past or only in the present, it breaks the chain that links us from the past to the present to the future. So today, on Shabbat, today on Pesach, I wish each of you a Chag Sameach, a happy holiday. I wish you a holiday filled with meaning, where the rituals and the traditions that have been passed down for generations find a place to live, not just on your tables and in your homes, but in your hearts and in your spirit. That they can change us, that they can help us to live up to the ideals of what it means to have been brought out of Egypt, not to serve ourselves, but to serve God. To know what it means to be oppressed and to seek freedom for those who today are. To be that link in the chain between the two. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.